everyone. Thank you for joining us for our very first Cozy and Sweet Chit Chat. This month at the Cozy and Sweet Blissful Reading Facebook group, we are discussing books that have been written in honor of sisters and siblings. I'm Mindy Kilgrove, and I do have a couple of those books myself, but this evening I have invited a couple of other authors to sit with me, hang out, and embrace this little bit of chit chat. We have Karin Thompson and also Ashli Montgomery, as well as my friend and sister, sorority sister, Jen Cammann is our moderator this evening. So I'd like to begin just by introducing myself and telling you I am here in sunny Orlando, Florida. For this evening, we are at about 96 degrees, so I'm sweltering, but everything's good because the storm has already gone through for today, so you shouldn't see any lightning or anything behind me this evening. How about you, Karin? Where are you coming to us from this evening?
Hi there. I'm from Sydney, Australia. It's 9 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday, so I'm a bit in the future here. And it's winter. It's been raining last night, and apparently it's going to rain today. So I don't know if I'll be able to go for a walk. But yeah, right across the other side of the wall, which is quite exciting.
Thank you for joining us. And how about you, Ashli?
I am in Virginia, Blacksburg, Virginia, and this is my first summer here, so I'm just getting used to it. Born and raised in Texas and spent some time in Oklahoma and Alabama, but always a little farther south. So this is taking a little getting used to, but it's just beautiful here. We live up in the mountains, and talking about going for a walk, Karin, I take our dogs walking multiple times a day, and it's just gorgeous.
And finally, Jen, where are you coming to us from this evening or this morning, depending on where you are?
So it is evening here. I am in Lexington, South Carolina, and it's very hot still, but not quite as hot as where you are, Mindy. No stormy weather. I think whatever storm you have coming through is going to just roll right past us. So I'm here, I'm moderating, and I'm here as a fan of the genre and your book. So I'm so excited to get started.
Thank you. Once again, I appreciate you, the three of you, being with us here this evening. But for those of you who are joining us, whether you come in a little bit late to the chat or you get the opportunity to watch this later on YouTube, please be sure to let us know who you are, where you are coming from this evening or this morning, whenever you get a chance to view. And if you have any questions or comments, please drop them in the chat box so that maybe our moderator can take a peek at them and incorporate them into the discussion. But without further ado, I am going to pitch it to Jen so she can ask the authors a few questions about their writing.
Okay, so all of you write in the genre of sweet romances. So I'm curious about why that genre.
You want me to go first?
Sure, go ahead, Karin.
I think if you're going to write, you've got to write something pleasant. I don't like horror, and I don't like sci-fi and aliens. There's enough gruesome going on in the world without having to read it. I think I just like something light-hearted and something, where you can just sort of relax and breathe and get involved with the characters and enjoy the story. And then when it ends, you just smile and think, oh, that was a nice book. I just think, cozy is the right word, sweet is the right word. So I just like I take people on a bit of a journey with my characters. I don't want to put them to sleep, but at least make a page turner. But I do like that, they get involved. They feel like they've ticked a box. They've enjoyed a good read and got out of maybe their world and their moments that aren't pleasant and just sort of sit back and had some peaceful moments somewhere else. And so that's why I write sweet romance.
I agree with all of those. Yeah, I absolutely I check mark all of those things. I also, as a young adult, out of college and a young family and starting to read for pleasure, I found romance novels and fell in love with them, just fell in love with love stories. And I think that when I sat down to write, I had read such a wide variety of romances, I honestly didn't know what was going to come on the computer. Like I didn't know what was going to happen on the page. And the more I wrote, the more it just felt like that was the heat level that I wanted to share with the world. And I will confess, I've read much less heat and much more heat, and I've enjoyed some, and I've not finished others. And I just for me, this just felt like the right fit. And I always have a few threads of faith in my books. And honestly, as this writing journey has progressed, I find myself pulled closer and closer to inspirational and faith-based romance, even more so than strictly clean and sweet. So I don't know. It just feels like the right place to be.
So
And
you're
Mindy,
growing
how
and
about you?
changing. I love it. I love that you're growing and changing. I think that's really good as a writer.
Yes.
Well, for me, Jen, I actually started writing when I was ghost writing. I would bounce back and forth between sweet, and then there was some steamy, and then I jumped into spicy, and there would be moments where I would get flushed while I was writing because I was kind of embarrassed by the things I was putting out there. And so that's when I came back to writing for myself as opposed to other people. And I thought, I really need to stick right here in the sweet and clean, because when I try to do other things, it makes me blush.
That's so funny. And knowing you as my sorority sister, that's interesting to learn that bit of information about you. That's all I'm going to say. So no further questions on that. But Ashli and Mindy, you both had mentioned writing with a little bit of heat. But Karin, I'm interested in hearing from you. Have you ever considered writing more of a spicy romance story?
No, I'm also a Christian, so I tend to keep it on the level. I might write a bit more because I've come from an abusive background. I write a lot of my characters are going through trauma, going through drama, maybe home life is not existence, or having no parents or things like that. I bring a lot of my past into my characters and then develop them, and they find people that love them and find a place in their world where they can sort of feel accepted and accommodated and find themselves. So a lot of my stories are sort of the journey of this character developing and leaving home and finding out how they're going to cope in the world, and then they meet someone, and it's clean, it's cozy. There's a kiss, there's a hug. It's more finding her place where she can just be herself and accept herself, and now start a life fresh with someone that she loves.
I love that. And that kind of sets us up for our next question, because I'm hearing lots of like support system influences in your stories, how your main character is going to need to find some support as she goes through her trauma. So this month is all about friends and sisters. That's the theme of this month. So first question, let's do sisters. Do sisters play a role in the stories you create? And how do the sisters typically present themselves? Are they your stereotypical, like, great big sister or little sister, I'm there for you no matter what? Or do you ever write about like an antagonist sister? So let's just talk sisters.
Well, I have. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, you carry on. You carry on.
I have sisters in quite a few of my stories. Sometimes they're just there as another support person. So they just happen to maybe live in the same town, or they have a shared interest with the main character. Other times they play a huge role, and sometimes it's because one of the sisters has passed away. And so that grief has influenced the life of the main character. But then other times the sister is there as a friend, a roommate, someone who our main character can really rely upon. So for me, I'm constantly infusing sisters into the story and trying to give them some kind of role in the life of the main character.
And Karin, how about you?
I wrote a story about a father that passed away, and in his will, he was a very wealthy man. In his will, he left a substantial amount of money to his two children. a brother and sister, but they were estranged. They hadn't spoken to each other for like 5 years. They just they weren't blood brothers and sisters. The father remarried, and so they were put together. And the son from the father felt that this girl now came in and took over his whole world, and so he was very had a lot of animosity towards her, and didn't like her. And so now the only way they're both going to inherit this kind of money is that they have to be together for, I think it was 30 days at a B&B, and spend the day together, every day together. And they had to just try and have a proper relationship before the funds would be released. And so there was a lot of tension, a lot of hate, a lot of anger. And eventually they found out that they actually got a lot in common and they were best friends. And then I've got another book that I've just written out now. They're twins, and brother and sister. And the brother is always protecting his sister until he actually destroys her character in a way that he spoils her. And he overprotects her, and she becomes, she knows that she has the power to manipulate and to control the things. So I do use brother and sisters in my stories, and I think it just adds another depth. It's more personal, and it's more. We've all got brothers and sisters, most of us. So you sort of can relate. Oh, that's my sister. She's just like that. That's what my brother would do to me. It sort of adds a depth to that.
I love that. Ashli, how about you?
Yeah, I would take that a step further. They always say to write what you know, and my sister and sisters-in-law are some of my closest friends, and I depend on them on a weekly basis, and I just can't imagine not sharing those relationships in my books. My first miniseries, I started out with a set of three siblings, two girls and a boy, and then my publishing coach said, you need your first grouping to be at least 4 books. So I thought, well, what am I going to do? So I wrote in best friends that might as well be a sister because they're that close. And now I'm writing a trilogy set in Scotland that is focused around a set of 3 sisters. So I think that just like plays on my heart, and that relationship feels, I don't want to say easy to include in books, but definitely relatable, like you said, and something that can really add a lot about a character without having to tell you everything about them. A relationship with a sister really reveals that.
So let's go ahead and stay on that topic of friends. We mentioned just now about like sisters that aren't actually sisters, but are like that way because they're such close friends. But let's think about friends in another way. Let's think about friends to lovers. Have you ladies ever written any stories where we do have that friends to lovers situation happening?
Yes, I did. I wrote a Christmas novella a couple years ago called Undeveloped Love, and the main characters start out in a battle over some property, and they are at each other's throats before they even know who the other person is. And then, of course, through time forced together, they end up realizing that maybe the other person's not quite so awful, and in fact, they might even love them. And so it was one of my favorite books to write. I didn't know that I would enjoy that tug of war as much as I did, and I call it an enemies to forever, just because what I write is pretty clean and wholesome. But just watching their relationship develop was a ton of fun, and being able to write in a little more snarky dialogue and them snipping at each other, that was a lot of fun to write.
Mindy, how about you?
I've written a couple of friends to lovers romances, but they were not under my name. They were under other names as my ghostwriting position. But I do have a great idea for one percolating, and I'm so excited to get it written, because the thing I love about the friends to lovers romance is the moment where things change. And especially in a lot of my books, when I'm definitely leaning towards very, very sweet, they don't get the opportunity to kiss even until the very end of the book. And so when that happens, it just feels so triumphant, especially when it's friends, two friends realizing their feelings for one another. And then there's this just majestic almost moment where their worlds collide and they share a kiss. So I cannot wait to write that moment.
And that's one of the
Yeah,
best parts
good.
about the cozy romances that y'all write is that it's just this prolonged, just moment upon moment. You're just waiting for a kiss or a touch or anything. And I think that just makes the genre, well, part of what makes the genre so easy to read and accessible for everybody. Karin, I wanted to give you a chance to answer that same question. Have you ever done any friends to lovers stories?
Yes, my latest book, My Best Friend's Secret, is about that. That's one of the secrets. From the moment he met her, they met in primary school because they were neighbors, and sort of he just knew she was special, and they grew up through the high school into adult life, and he never told her. And then when he did, a whole lot of calamity happens and tragedy, and she ends up going separate paths, and how they find each other coming back. So it's maybe not so much an enemy, but it was more a best friend suddenly becomes a lover, and you think she just couldn't wrap her head around it because all these years they were just, they were in the playground together and they were having ice cream together and they were just friends. But meanwhile, he had ulterior motives, so it sort of puts it together. And like you say, at the end, it all comes together, and there's that kiss, and you think, oh, I lost. I could have told you this was going to happen, type of thing. So it actually is. It's very interesting developing the characters and putting all this on the page. And I don't know about you guys, but I know when I start writing, when I finished my book, it wasn't all in my head. It sort of grows as you write, and as the characters develop, you sort of think, let me throw this in, let me throw this in, and you sort of make it bigger and bigger as you get along, to try and close it down. Yeah.
Jen, I think all of my readers are going to say, Ashley, you've lost your mind because you said friends to lovers, and I heard enemies to lovers, and I sat there and described my favorite enemies to lovers book. But I have written friends to lovers as well. My fourth book, I mentioned that I had the three siblings; they each got a book, and then the fourth book was their best friends falling in love. And so they were already buddies. They all knew one another really well. And then they go through quite a challenging time and realize that they have always been there for one another and truly are in love. So, yes, I love that trope as well.
And that is all good in real life and in fiction. I think that we can relate to like an enemies to friends to lovers. So it's following that progression. So that works.
Exactly.
So let's go ahead and talk about friends. So I'm assuming that all of you typically write a friend that's got a sidekick. We touched on, sisters or maybe a friend who's like a sister. So is that true? Do you typically write stories where your main character does have some kind of sidekick best friend? Mindy, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Always. There's always some kind of best friend. And most of the time, I go out of my way to make sure that even if the friend has a side story or a subplot of their own, that it doesn't overshadow what's happening with the main characters. I feel like a lot of times other authors do that, where they don't just give you the sidekick character or the buddy character. Everybody has their own story. But in my novels, they tend to be a little more streamlined, where it's like, okay, here's your main character and here's their support system. Except, and I know that Jen knows this, but in my first series, the first series that I wrote, the Missy Lawrence trilogy, it's all about friendship. Missy Lawrence is the main character, but in the books Meet Me at the Pond, Meet Me at Fountain Park, and Meet Me at Blessed Creek, her friends are very much involved, and they all have their own stories that are being told. So after I wrote it and I was thinking, okay, how do I sell this trilogy? Like, what happens when I try to get this out there? I actually came up with the tagline, first comes friendship, then we find love, because that's really what happens throughout those three books.
Okay, Karin, how about you? Do you have sidekicks for your main characters typically?
Yeah, I do have friends. I normally find my friends seem to be the conscience that my main character doesn't have. Because a lot of my characters are not trusting people because of their history. So they've sort of do things, and when they bump into a friend and they sort of decide, okay, look, I'm going to open up, I'm going to let you into my world, and then the friend becomes the conscience that that she needs to have. No, but you can't do that, or you shouldn't do that, or do you really think you should? So it's sort of a voice in her head type of thing. And then as the friendship grows, she realizes that this person is really more valuable than she's letting them be. They've got a lot of insight that she needs, and maybe and the relationship grows. So I do think friends are important, because it can't just all be about the main person. You've got to have a bit of other people to fill in the pages, and then they do stories, and they have their own shenanigans going on, and maybe go out somewhere and dress up. And so I do like to include someone close, someone that sort of knows a bit more secrets than anybody else does.
Mm-hmm. Ashli, how about you?
So I write all of my stories centered around one fictional town that I created. So I'm doing a lot of world building. So you will see characters pop back up in other books. And it's a little bit like an ongoing soap opera, because I've had a lot of readers say, I love getting to know what the character from book one is now doing in book six, or so on, like that. And so each book, you might meet up with someone that's either brand new to the community, or someone that we haven't met yet, or someone that we have already met. Maybe we already know their love story, but they will play a more significant role. And it's a lot to build a whole world. And so I really keep up with where people are at in their lives, and where this couple would be at this point of this story. So it's a fun way to bring those characters in as supporting cast of characters. And I think that it really does, just like I was saying earlier, and we talked about how a sibling relationship, or a close sister or friend who's as close as a sister, having those relationships to use to further the story, and to really present who a character is internally. Those are really good tools when you're writing. And so I definitely have other people in their lives who are there. I have a matriarch in the town that is like everyone's grandmother, and she's a friend to everyone she meets, and she's very important in this fictional town of Green Hills. And yeah, so definitely those supporting characters are important in my stories.
Nice. And that's a perfect segue into this next question. To be honest, I am the most interested in hearing your answers to this next question. So, have you ever written a story where you had some supporting characters, and you've either loved them so much, or maybe they were just so fun to hate, or they were just annoying, and just annoying enough that you felt like they needed their own book all about them? So I'm super curious to hear all about this whole process. Mindy, will you get us started on this one?
Sure.
Thank you.
So I do this all the time, Jen.
Yeah.
I all the time in all of my books. When I started writing the book Royally Engaged, it was initially supposed to be a standalone, but in the book I introduced the main characters' family members, and when I got to the end, I just thought, I'm not done with them yet. So voila, now there's 4 books in that series. And it just keeps going from there. I guess my newest series is the Buenaventura Beach Cozy Mystery series, and there's 7 books in there. But many of the characters came from other book series that I had written. So if you read Royally Engaged, one of the characters there, she appears later in the Buenaventura Beach Mystery series. And then there's crossover from every one of my books. So when Ashli, when you're talking about world building, I decided when I built Buenaventura Beach that I wanted to populate it with some of the secondary and tertiary characters from other books, because I knew their stories were not concluded yet. So I think that's so much fun. And thanks for asking that question, Jen.
Of course. Karin, how about you?
Yes, I wrote a book about a retired couple that were opening a B&B, Jillian and Peter Osborne. And she just was very mischievous, very nosy. She interfered in all her guests' life. She gave all her opinions. I mean, she went over the top. I mean, when you went there to the B&B, you got more than you bargained for. And it turned out that everyone really enjoyed reading about her and her humorous and her tactics and things she got up to. That it just couldn't be one book. And so I made it a series. I made three. I thought, I've got to stop it somewhere. But I've had a few nags for 4 and 5. But only so many people can come to the B&B, and I've got to start getting real creative now, trying to find new characters and what are they going to get up to. But people have really enjoyed her because she's so out of the box. It's a good laugh. It's very different writing. You have to sort of be in the mood to try and make something funny. Sometimes you feel serious and your characters are serious, so the whole book ends up being serious. But this was a very light-hearted book, and surprisingly, people just seem to enjoy it more. Maybe they just need a good laugh or just more relaxing. But the characters develop, and you're actually surprised yourself when they develop because you weren't really planning to develop them that much. And next thing you know, they just become everything. And you start thinking, oh, they must do this and they can do that. And it's hard to sort of find a place to stop because you can write so many books about it. But it's very enjoyable. I really enjoy it.
I would guess that's a lot of fun as writers to just have this secondary character that suddenly is very relatable or enjoyable or love to hate, whatever it might be that resonates with readers, and then can kind of become this whole different kind of a story arc or whole standalone set of stories. So Ashli, what about you?
Yeah, I think going into a lot of my stories, I already have an idea that I want this person to have their own book later. But the last book that I released earlier this spring was my first historical romance. And I had a prearranged marriage. And so this other guy, he's the villain and he's the one that nobody wants to mess up this beautiful love story that's happening. And somewhere along the writing, he just took on a different personality and he becomes someone that the readers have said, okay, but now what happens to Xavier? And so I think he's going to definitely need his own story. Yeah.
Nice. That sounds exciting. So, for the sake of time, ladies, I'm going to ask one last question for tonight. And again, sticking with the theme of friends tonight, if your friends could describe you in 3 words, what would they say, or what would you want them to say? Karin, I'm going to let you go first with this one.
Oh. Well, I'd like to say that they enjoy my books. They would mean a lot to me because what's the point of writing if no one enjoys your writing? And I'm grateful that I do get good feedback. So yes, I would like to say that they enjoy my books and keep it going.
Okay. Mindy?
Oh, I think I would say in 3 words, they would call me organized and serious and diligent, probably. Those tend to be the things that I prize above all other. And for anyone who knows me, organization tends to be my strongest suit.
Nice. Ashli, how about you?
I think they would say that I'm ambitious, and I think they would say creative, and I hope that they would say encouraging and supportive.
Nice. Well, Mindy, I'm going to bring it back to you because
Okay.
that concludes my part of this evening.
Jen, do you mind if we turn that question on you real fast? You've been such a great moderator, but
Ooh. Oh
if
my
your
goodness.
friends could describe you in 3 words, what do you think they would say?
Okay, on the fly right now, I guess I would say enthusiastic. I would say loyal. I would hope that they say that I'm loyal, and fun. I'm just going to throw in fun.
You are, it's true. I can testify to that.
Thank you.
So I just want to take this opportunity to thank all 3 of you again for joining me this evening. And I would like to say next month, we are going to be looking at sports stories. It can be sports that appear in romances. It could be sports that somehow weave their way into cozy crime stories. I am really excited to see what pops up when we get into the sports stories. Also, here at Cozy and Sweet Blissful Reading, we do have our book of the month, which comes to us from Ashli. We are reading, thank you for having it. Look at you all prepared. Perfect. We are reading Grocery Girl right now, and it is so much fun. It incorporates all of the themes from this month with sisters, friends, and of course, she introduces us to the small town that she has had the pleasure of creating. So, for anybody who has picked up this book and read it or still needs to get a copy, join us at the end of the month as we come back and get to kind of grill her a little bit about this book and learn more about those characters she created. Until then, thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.